And here is our famous
What the
big
hell
game
is
hunter.
this? What kind of jungle is this? This is just terrible. Oh. Shame on you. Oh. And you're ashamed. Emerson, what the hell are you doing here? Are you still here? Oh. All right. All right. All right. Hey. Ah! Ah! All right. Ah! Ooh. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I realized that coming to this seminar yesterday and having a dinner, wine, going up to the hospitality suite, have a couple of beers, and then golf this morning, 18 holes, lunch, and then this guy coming in and probably speaking about gases at the beginning of the century or something like that. Everybody was prepared to sleep. So we thought that we would wake you up a little bit. Maybe for the next 30 minutes or so. If you sleep in, I will start something again. So anyway, this is something I call the fundamentals of gases. And the reason why I have done this is that I started in the textile industry, I came to the car industry, then to the building material industry. And 25 years ago, I was employed by AGA as a sales manager for gases and for a lot of other things that AGA was selling. And I didn't get much training. You probably get much training, better training than I got. I was about 1 week in a welding school, and I was around looking at some steelworks and so on. But anyway, it took me about 5 years to understand some of these strange things that are related to gases. And maybe I can help somebody but by showing some of these things, that it took at least me such a long time. And I would say 5 years. I would be interested to see how many of you have been more than 5 years in the industry. Well, shall we let them play 9 holes of golf, Pat? Well, there are 92 elements according to the Gas Handbook, published in 1989. I've seen also that there are more elements than 92, but 11 of them are classified as or defined as gases. And they are gases from the absolute temperature, which is minus 183, I think, Celsius, and it goes up to plus 27. Why it's plus 27 degrees, I don't know. But anyway, those are defined as gases. And so there are only 11 pure gases, but there are pure elements that are gases. But there are an unlimited number of chemical compounds and also of gas mixtures. I just asked a guy here who is not working with gases, Tom Emerson, that I offended when I came in here. Can you think of any gas mixture? There are many gas mixtures also. Can you think of one? Oh, that's a good one. I thought you were going to say air, which is the most common one. Anyway, I think that gases are very unique, and I'm going to try to show you why I think that they are unique compared to some other products I've been selling and working with. So I'll see if I can get this into focus. Here I'm speaking about the product that I cannot demonstrate to you. You cannot see it, you cannot hear it, you cannot smell it, you cannot taste it, you cannot feel it. These are our 5 senses. Sex is supposed to be our 6th sense, but anyway. That doesn't help you either when it comes to gases, I think. So this is a big question mark for most people. What is it, really? And I've seen in so many of our gas expositions and our reports and so on that we try to avoid this problem by showing our trucks and our cylinders and our tanks and so on. And after a while, the public thinks that we are selling tanks and trucks and so on. And our suppliers are very happy that we do all this promotion for them. So that's, I think, the first uniqueness of the product and why it's so difficult. Now, gas is a uniform product, and it means that if there is a deviation, let's say that there is our oxygen is not the same as union carbide's oxygen. It's of course union carbide's oxygen that is not quite pure. It should be absolutely the same product that we are selling. So we cannot distinguish ourselves like you can in the car industry by having a nice design or some good motor prestanda or something like that. So therefore, we are trying as gas companies to differentiate. And we do that through service. We are each trying to give the customer a better service than our competitors are doing. But I must say, all our competitors have been in the business 50 years or more. And they have about the same service as we have. It's very difficult, really, to say that our service is better than their service. At least on an average, I think the service is very similar. So then we try with application technology. And we are trying to find new applications all the time, be a little bit ahead of our competitors. And that sometimes succeeds. And this is, I think, what you're discussing here. Very important. But about 90% of all these applications are well known, unfortunately, to our competitors. So that's not either easy to say that we have something new or we are better. So therefore, unfortunately, you come at the end of the day to the price with the customer. And this is what I'm going to tell you a little bit about. We always try to tell our sales organizations price, not ever mention it, you know. That if you have to, you can always be a good salesman if the price is low enough. That's evident. There is always some level where you can sell. And that's not what we want. But sometimes, and you have certain experience, that price is the ultimate the difference. And because of that, we have to have the lowest total costs in our industry. And really on every local market. And I will come back to these local markets. Sometimes people ask us, how big are you in the United States? As we are not in Florida or in California, it's not a relevant question. You have to look at every market for itself. And on that market, let's say the Chicago market, we have to have the lowest cost. Now the cost has basically three components. The first is capital, and we try to keep capital costs low in various ways. One has been practiced by AGA in Latin America and by us in North Carolina, namely use an old plant that is written off and so on. Then you have a low capital cost. Unfortunately, you burn yourself because the electricity consumption will increase. So you're sitting there. Another possibility is to build a huge plant so that the capital cost per unit produced and sold will be the lowest possible. And some competitors have been doing that. For instance, there are two huge plants in the Chicago area, in La Porte, isn't it? Yeah. Indiana. Now, so they built huge plants, 1,000 tons per day. And they also gained because then they got a low electricity cost because they put the plants in a location where there was low electricity. But they are giving up something when it comes to distribution. It's a little bit outside where you ideally would like to locate your plant. So this is very difficult, but this is the game you play. Another way of having low capital costs is to build a plant together with a competitor, and strangely enough, because then you can get it big enough, strangely enough, Air Products and Liquid Air are building a huge plant in California. And AGA and Messer are building a rather big plant in Sheffield in England. So even the bitter enemies sometimes go together in order to get the capital costs down. But then it has to be a neutral production company. Distribution, that's evident, you know, that you will try to find out where the distribution costs are the lowest. And there are computer models for this, and Air Products, I think, was the first one that had a computer model. As you well know, we are well advanced in this area also. So, and the last way that I'm coming back to decrease capital cost is to find a big customer, so that the customer will pay part of the capital costs. And this was, I'm making promotion for Air Products here, but they started this on a big scale in the 60s. And the investment cost increases with the square root of the capacity. So if you build a plant that is 4 times bigger than what you need, it's only going to cost twice as much or double as much. And ideally, therefore, if this equation should be perfect, you have to find a customer that needs 75% of your capacity. And then the remaining 25%, you will have that at half the capital cost. And you take out that product from the column and you invest 100% yourself in a liquefier, and you do that for what is called the merchant market. I'll come back to what the merchant market is. Unfortunately, there are very few opportunities to find pipelines. There might be one pipeline opportunity per continent per year. They are extremely unique. And therefore, to find a pipeline exactly where you want to have it from a distribution point of view, the probability is almost nil. And I think it's getting more and more difficult. And this is why you see these joint ventures and oversized plans. Now, there is another thing you have to think about also when it comes to costs. You have to sell all the molecules that you produce. If you don't sell all the molecules, evidently, you are wasting electricity. And by the way, capacity also. And the air contains about 4 times the volume of, 4 times the amount of oxygen. In reality, nitrogen is used for the cryogenic process, so it's not 4 times the oxygen, it's 2.5 times. But still, you have to sell a lot of nitrogen. The argon is no problem to sell. So far, it has been possible to sell all the argon without a problem at a good price, and that has been very important for the profitability of the air gas production. Rare gases are very seldom, only in the very big air separation plants are they taken out. And we have not done that so far. So I take an example here, which is Canton, Ohio, where we are not selling all the molecules. Canton is namely ideal because it's a big plant, it's a big pipeline customer, it's a relatively low electricity cost, the location is good from a distribution point of view. But this force element is not so good. It was namely so that Timken needed 300 tons per day. And we thought, okay, we will need 200 tons per day of oxygen, which means 500 tons per day of oxygen. And today, we use 350 of the 500 tons of oxygen and have a surplus of 150. That's okay. And Timken will hopefully, through your good assistance, need more oxygen in their applications. But look at the nitrogen. 2.5 times 500 tons per day is 1,250 tons per day of nitrogen, and we only sell 350. We have a mountain of nitrogen to sell. And this is kind of a waste in the system. So please sell more nitrogen. And we can look how this looks on the world scale here, worldwide market scale. In the United States in 1980, which is approximately 10 years ago, oxygen and nitrogen had, forget that this is in metric cube, it doesn't matter. If you multiply by 35, you get it in feet. Anyway, in 1980, the volume of oxygen sold was the same as the volume of nitrogen sold. And then you can see that in the last 10 years, due to what I just said, better utilization of the plants, and also development in the chemical industry, in the electronic industry and so on, there has been a bigger demand for nitrogen. And the nitrogen is today almost 2 times the oxygen. And if you remember the number 2.5 time, there is not so much nitrogen to sell in the United States. And most of the producers are today holding off, not installing in big plants if they can avoid it, because they are fine-tuning this now with other production methods, non-cryogenic production methods, which do not demand such enormous commitments in money as these cryogenic plants. Now in Europe, it was the same thing 10 years ago. 800 tons or million cubic meters per year and 700. That's about the same level of oxygen and nitrogen. However, the European gas market was not that well developed as the American gas market. And Europe has about the same industrial potential as the United States has, and the same number of people. I'm for the moment excluding Eastern Europe. Nobody really knows what the potential of Eastern Europe is. So this is the old Europe. So it's much less consumption of gases. And then in 10 years, just as or opposite to the United States, the oxygen has doubled in Europe. That shows that there was an undeveloped gas market. And the nitrogen has developed 4 times. So Europe now starts to be more in parity with the United States. It's about the similar development. So then it's interesting to see what AGA looks like. 10 years ago, AGA was selling much less nitrogen than oxygen. And today, we have made quite an effort on both, as you see. So we have more than doubled the oxygen, and we have quadrupled the nitrogen. But still, oxygen and nitrogen are in AGA at about the same level. I'm sorry to say AGA is 10 years behind in the development here, logically. We have, not only in Canton, but all over the world, a surplus nitrogen to sell. And we need dearly to develop nitrogen applications. And it would cost very, very little in new investments in capacity. Now, another unique thing is that the same product can be distributed in 3 different modes. It can be distributed in cylinders, it can be distributed in liquid form, and it can be distributed in pipeline. And this makes it still more complex to understand the gas market and how the gas market operates. The cryogenic process is very expensive. It's complicated and it's expensive. Today you can hardly build a plant under $10 million. They have to calculate with $15 or $20 million. I'm speaking about 300 tons per day plant like we have in Dayton. There are, as I said, bigger plants being built now. And this means, of course, that you cannot go around and build these enormous plants for other customers than very big customers, or have you build them when you have your demand from the merchant market that is big enough. The cryo process also demands an enormous amount of electricity. As I said before, air is what we are using, and some people think air is our raw material. That is right from a theoretical point of view, but from a practical point of view, it's much better to look at as electricity as our raw material. I think that gives a much better understanding of what we are doing. And therefore it's so important that we have low cost for our electricity supply and very efficient use of our electricity. And basically, the liquid that we produce in our big plants is going to the process market. And you are working with the process market, so I don't have to explain what that is. While some of the liquid, and I'll show you later, it's not so much, but some of the liquid is used for cylinders, being filled into cylinders and distributed to what we call the base market. And the base market is basically welding and cutting, where you either put metals together or you cut them apart, or for the medical market, which tends to be of a similar nature with many small customers. There are some liquid also going to the base market. There are big customers that may use acetylene and propane cylinders, and they use liquid oxygen, for instance. And then we classify the liquid oxygen as going to the base market. There were times when we had 3 salesmen going to the same customer. One was selling liquid oxygen, for instance. The next day came a guy who was selling acetylene cylinders, and the third day a guy came and said, I'm from AGA, I want to sell some welding equipment. And this was very confusing, and we have tried to put that together. And now these cryogenic methods are coming, and especially nitrogen is now well developed. And I'm speaking both about PSA and membranes, and we can foresee that these methods will come in to all these markets. You might wonder, can it really come into the cylinder market? Yes, I think it can, but it will take some time. And in the medical field, it has already done that, as a matter of fact. So this is what we can foresee in the future. And some people in the industry think that by the year 2000, which is only about seven years away, we are going to have 30% of the nitrogen market supplied with non-cryogenic methods. Now this shows how these molecules I spoke about are being distributed, also from Canton, Ohio. So about 60% of the molecules go to the Timken through pipeline. And 37, almost 40, goes to the process market. And very little, as you see, 5% goes to our distribution centers, Twinsburg and other filling stations and so on. And this shows that it's not possible to build up enough capacity just by selling cylinders. And air gas is now twice our size, but they have, as far as I know, no production of air gases. And I don't think they will have any either, because it's not really possible to build up a plant. You could theoretically do it, but you will only have one plant in the United States and enormous distribution costs. So then you will have an excessive D in that formula I showed you. peculiarity is the packaging. 5 times the product. I'm just thinking about the toothpaste or something. You know, if you had toothpaste distributed in a packaging that weighed 5 times the paste that you can take out of it, plus the fact that you have to give the tube back again, then it is in reality 10 times, because this cylinder has to be returned. This is a very inefficient method of transportation and of distribution. And to understand that a cylinder, you have certainly been buying liquor duty-free and so on. You know, a US quart is about 1 liter. I think it's 95 centiliter. Well, one liter anyway is, let's say, one quart. And a normal cylinder contains 50 liters. That's the water content if you put water in it. But if we have air in it instead, and we increase the pressure of the air 200 times of what the atmospheric pressure is, then we get 200 times the 50. I will not explain the beauty of the metric system here, but it's 50 dm to the cube times 200. And that gives 10,000 liters of dm, and which is the same as 10 cubic meters. And that's our normal 330 cubic feet cylinder, our big cylinder for oxygen. Now, it's evident that having gas at that pressure in the cylinder means that you have to have a very robust and strong cylinder, otherwise it will explode. And this is, of course, why this weight is so tremendous. And therefore also, you cannot distribute this cylinder very far. Because you are going to lose a lot of money. You get a D that is too big. And we think that 30 miles for individual cylinders is kind of a maximum. It's dangerous to use miles if you are distributing product in a big city like Chicago or New York. So you might say, okay, as a rule of thumb, I'm only sending the truck 1 hour in one direction. And whatever that is in miles is the optimum for what I want to do. If it comes to pallets, you can double these measures. You can say, okay, in pallets, you can take the cylinder 60 miles. And I know we even take it more than that from Twinsburg. And of course, that can take also more than an hour, such a transportation. I'll come back to that. When it comes to liquid products, 1 cubic foot of liquid is equal to 860 cubic feet of gases product, which means that you can compress this, the gas much more efficiently. And therefore, instead of this unfortunate relationship, if you take the weight of the trailer and the weight of the cryogenic tank, not of the truck, because we need trucks for the cylinders too, so I've excluded the truck or the tractor. Just take the tank and the trailer. You can bring 3 times more product than the weight of the tank and the trailer. So you have an opposite relationship. And then, of course, you can go much further. And we speak sometimes about 150 miles as a possible radius around the plant. Sometimes we build plants close to the water, and I've seen that happen in AGA now and then of course half the market is water. That's not very good. Build the plants inland, and I think also build new plants. There is another peculiarity with this packaging, and that is that the cost of the packaging is about 10 times the product. The cylinder costs about $100 or $120, and therefore you cannot lose it. You have to keep track of it, which is a tremendous administrative job. When I started with AGA in the 60s, we had in a subsidiary that was of about this size, or even smaller than AGA Gas. I am thinking of the German subsidiary. We had something like 60 or 70 people sitting manually checking the return of cylinders. An enormous work, and also very easy to make mistakes. And there were mistakes made, and then it almost never had an end. Now, of course, with optical reading and so on, we can keep track of it. AGA has 6 million cylinders in the whole worldwide system. And just think of it, how much money that is. If we evaluate them to $100, that's $600 million. The worth of these cylinders. As a matter of fact, they are taken up at a very low value, only about $150 million or something in our balance sheet. And, you know, $600 million, you could buy, if an air gas plant costs $20 million, you can build 30 plants for that. Or you could buy a small car for $10,000, let's say. That's 60,000 cars. You can park them all around here, these cars. Well, no, I'm... I told you. Another thing is reliable supply. And reliable supply means that we cannot have our truck be 1 hour late to a plant with an assembly line, as I managed to do in France. It was Chrysler at that time. And they were not happy at all. They had to stop the assembly line, and they wanted to charge us for 50 cars that were not made. And finally, of course, I said, well, you haven't used any material either. So we came to some kind of agreement where they got free supply. We never pay out money if we can avoid it. And another time, we delivered argon that was not pure, and TV sets, Philips TV sets. I'm taking examples from another country, you know, to avoid any. But it just shows that the quality control is so important. And if there is something wrong with the oxygen and so on, a child could die at the hospital. If it's the wrong gas, or it's not pure or not delivered in time. And there are customers that also might explode if we do not deliver the gas. So it really has, under all circumstances, to be delivered the right gas at the right quality. I cannot hardly think of any industry that has this enormous pressure to always deliver the right thing. And just think of when we use other suppliers, we get the wrong thing many times. And people say with a smile, oh, sorry, you know. We cannot say sorry if we don't deliver the gas to a hospital. And also that we do it in a safe way. And safety is so important in our industry. Some people think that our industry is very, very dangerous. That's not the case. We have very few accidents, as a matter of fact. But it can be very dangerous if safety measures are not being respected. And this company did not have a good safety record when I was the president. And I must say, Pat, it's much better now. It's an enormous improvement. And I'm very happy to see that. Let's have 5 minutes now break, and I'll come back to this, because I want you to also to react a little bit. Could you close the door, Pam? Could those who are not here raise an hand, please? So, I have showed you some of these rather unique things that relate to gases. And I would like you to now start to make questions. If anybody has a question at this point, feel free to come forward and later on. So we get, if there's something you wonder about or something you want to add, please do that. Anybody? You have a question?
Yes. I personally was kind of interested in the joint venture that Liquid Air and Air Products are putting together in California.
Yes.
Nuclear separation plant.
It's a joint venture between Liquid Air and Air Products in California.
Right.
I'm repeating your question so that everybody hears it.
And I know that that's also fairly common in Europe.
Yes.
Does AGA have an interest in pursuing that avenue in the United States, do you think?
Yes, I think we have. I will show this a little bit later on here, what it really means to build a plant and to unload the plant. So I think basically we have that kind of interest. The partner must also have the same interest, of course. Okay. Yes?
I have a question. Our mixture of nitrogen to oxygen, that's kind of unique in the industry, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Is that because of our development in the base market, the oxygen plants?
Well, I think that unfortunately AGA has been very much based in Sweden or in Scandinavia, let's say. And the Scandinavian steel industry and the Scandinavian pulp and paper industry are very big also on the world market. So we have therefore developed oxygen or oxygen applications. And somewhat by tradition, because of the acetylene, we have been into welding all the time also. Sweden does not have much chemical industry, petrochemical industry, or electronic industry. So I think this is a pattern we have to change and spend much more money and energy on. That will be after me, though. Any other question?
Yeah, I have a question. You showed a stat earlier that said that 5% of the can production goes towards cylinders.
Yes.
Do you know how much either world production or either that or the United States production goes towards cylinders? Is it
Well, there is no good statistics. It's the Department of Commerce that issues statistics. And the Department of Commerce issued the wrong statistics in 1990, and nobody really knows today how much is what. And it's difficult. We know what the merchant market is rather well, because we know the capacities, but we do not know how the distribution is between cylinders and liquid, really. And we can assume that it's about the same, 5%, which means that with 2 or 3 of these big ASUs, you could fill all the cylinders in the United States. But then you have this enormous distribution cost. Yes?
How about for gas oxygen when you first came over? Was that mostly a cylinder operation, or they mostly process?
It was mostly a distributor, let's say, in the normal sense that selling cylinders and small quantities of liquid for the base market. It had, however, started very ambitiously, without any application know-how almost, to sell liquid, but at rock bottom prices. And when we bought the company, was selling more liquid than the company produced. As I recall, the sales of liquid was at that time about 100 tons per day in that area. But we only produced about 700 tons per day, so we had to buy from our competitors. And buying from competitors is very seldom a good business. To swap with competitors is good, because then you save distribution costs. But just to buy from them net is seldom very good, because they will always see that they get some coverage of their capital costs, and they will also see that you do not get products where you really want it and so on, so that you can expand. Okay, let's look at the distribution of industrial gases. And this is kind of only repeating what I said at the beginning here. You start by building a big air separation plant for a customer that needs big quantities of oxygen or nitrogen or both over pipeline. And the pipeline, I've indicated 3 miles. You try to be in the neighborhood of that customer. There are, however, pipeline systems with many ASUs connected to them. And they are especially in regions like Texas, Louisiana, around the Gulf Coast. And there are some in Europe, in the rural area, in Belgium, Holland, northern France, and there are in Japan also. But anyway, this is a big ASU that is has a base load to a big customer. And then part of the capacity is used for liquid production, and that is in blue. And the liquid production either goes to the process customers directly, and I've indicated 150 miles there, or it goes to one of our cylinder distribution center. Now the cylinder distribution center I think is a very important feature that we have added, and that AGA has played a big role. We have, as a matter of fact, changed the structure of the gas business. In the old days, there were small distributors, and they were serving a small local market, and they filled perhaps 200 or 300 cylinders per day, and they had a truck. I usually say it's grandpa was filling the cylinders, mother was doing the accounting, and the son, who might be a high school dropout, was driving the truck, that kind of business. And they were bought up, in many cases, by the big air gas companies or air gas producers. And, but the air gas producers didn't change anything. They just continued. And this is what air gas has been doing also. They buy companies, but they let them be like they were before, the same structure. And many times also the owner remains as the manager. Now what we have been doing is we have centralized the filling for 10 or 15 of these branches. So we have then been able to industrialize this filling operation. And we are not rolling in individual cylinders any longer. We fill them in pallets, and we transport them in pallets. And that has increased the efficiency. And we think that the filling cost is about 1/3 of the cost of filling an individual cylinder. So there is a considerable gain, and that serving a bigger area with cylinders has also made it possible to regionalize the sales. And the branch managers, frankly, were, with some exceptions, Jim Simpson is here, I know that, or was here, but usually they were not good in directing their salesmen. So what we could do by having a bigger area, a bigger region, was to let the salesman belong to or report to a district manager. So we have been able, not only on the filling side or the operating side, to regionalize, but also on the marketing side. And I think that has had a big importance for us. The difficulty is, of course, to have the same local service. When Jim down the street needs a cylinder of acetylene in the middle of the lunch break because his cylinder is empty, and you want to, with a truck, to go down and help him out, the local cylinder, the local distributor has a better possibility to do that. For us, it's usually very expensive over a long distance to do that kind of service. And this is something we have been working on, as you know. So anyway, from this cylinder distribution center, which might fill, I think Twinsburg is filling around 3,000 cylinders per day. So it's 10 times more than a normal filling station. Then we send out these pallets. And the red there is the intercompany distribution of cylinders, going to our different retail stores. And then we have the local distribution, which might only be about 30 miles from the retail stores out to the customer. And this is something I think we should in the future analyze much more, what the retail customer really demands from us. Because if he is picking up the cylinder himself, he usually doesn't want to go more than about 10 miles, which means that we have to have a rather dense network of retail stores, which we have here in Cleveland, for instance. Now, equipment and gas are sold in very different ways. Gas sales It takes a long time to get the customer, to get the contract, a lot of work. But once you have got the contract, it might be a 3-year contract or a 5-year contract, or pipeline contracts or something, sometimes 15 years. Then you have a stream of revenues. First you have costs, it's a negative inclination of the line, but then you have revenues coming into you. And you are sitting there and all these nice revenues come. And also when there is a recession like now, gases are holding up rather well because the revenues come from sales we have done in the past. While equipment sales, you work for a while and then you sell and the customer pays the invoice, and he might not buy a new machine in the next 5 years, or a new car or whatever it is. And if there is a recession, there is no cash flow at all. He stops to buy and uses whatever equipment he has. So this is a big advantage. Few businesses are like this. There are those who try to be in this, like leasing business and renting business, and the Avis and the Hertz and so on. They try to have you as a customer always come back to them at the next airport. So they will continue to serve you, and you have this card, and they should be so convenient for you. So you continue to pay them cash all the time, like a gas customer. But from that point of view, we have a fantastic industry, lovely industry. Enjoy it. Now, something a little bit strange and difficult to understand is the price, how it can vary for the same product. I'm taking oxygen, for instance. Let's say in a pipeline that the oxygen costs 5 cents, it will cost 50 cents in liquid and $5 in a cylinder. And I saw Mike at the restroom, a very pure gas. You could even think of having another factor of 10. Really, if it's an extraordinary pure gas that you supply. So it would be $50 for, let's say, 100 per 100 cubic feet. And this is enormous, the same product. It's even worse than the airline companies. You can go to Europe for $300. It costs $450 to go to Washington, return. There's some stupid prices. And of course, a customer that doesn't understand the structure of our business will be very surprised to see these prices. And many customers don't understand them either. And this, I think, is important. As I said before, there is the big C, the big E, and the big D, which is distribution. In this case, I'm only looking at liquid distribution. There are, of course, distribution of cylinders and so on also. And almost no other costs. Are there any union employees here? Because what we pay in salaries and wages at an air separation plant is not decisive for our cost base. So we can almost neglect that. But it's it's dangerous. I can tell you, when I worked at Saab, I worked in the car division. They were just outside. I was a low-level employee and didn't have a window to the outside. I had a window to the workshop of Saab, with the assembly hall. And they were assembling jet fighters. And some of these workers there had master's degrees in science. Of course, if the product costs so much as a jet fighter, you can have that. And there is a similar thing. And of course, now, as you know, you can run a plant over the telephone, Pat. But we prefer not to do that. But still, salaries are not that big. So anyway, let's look here. Somebody has built the plant. And this is the structure of the cost. It's a plant that costs $20 million. And the electricity cost is there. The liquid transportation cost is there. Strangely enough, I heard a figure 12 cents yesterday from Waukesha, which if you add the 2 and the 10, it's a kind of a production cost, because that figure did not include capital or distribution costs. So I'm not so far off, it seems. But anyway, what is fixed here, the moment you have built this beautiful air separation plant on a green field, like we did in North Carolina, you have the capital cost. You cannot do anything about it. It's there. And you also have to run the plant, and you cannot reduce the number of employees to a half or 1/3 and so on, because then you cannot run it. So this is fixed also. And up to about 60% of capacity, and if you start on a new market, you have no customers, you have no load. You cannot run the compressors at less than about 60%. So you can also say that the 10 cents there are fixed costs up to 60% load. And in liquid transportation, there are another 2 cents that are fixed. So now you have 6 cents left, and that's for liquid transportation. And if it's a big customer close to the plant, maybe you have 3 cents transportation cost. And then, of course, selling the product at 4 cents seems to give a marginal revenue. And every time a competitor does it, he is completely stupid, doesn't understand the business, and he is a saboteur and so on. If we do it, we have this kind of reasoning, and we do it because we have to load the plant, and if we don't do it, we are never going to have a market, and we can not exist. So anytime anybody builds a plant, the whole market, and as I said, this is our local markets, all of them, becomes unstable. And whether the competitor or we like it or not, there will be a price war. It has to be. And this will continue for 2 or 3 years until the competitor has loaded his plant to 60%, let's say, and start to run normally. And then he will have another price situation. And over time, he will also have probably shareholders that ask him for a little bit better return and so on. So prices start to go up again until some other idiot builds a plant. And that has happened over and over again under the 80s. We never seem to learn in our industry. We build plants, we love them, we look at them, and I have been doing that. You know, we have great inaugurations, the governor, the ambassador, and so on. And we love that. But there is a price to pay. And now I'm becoming more and more shareholder and less employees. So I'm not so sure what I should think about this. And as I've said before, there are 2 different markets. And I think I was one of the first at AGA to distinguish these markets, because we used to sell as I said before, we didn't really think about which market we were serving. We were just selling our product. While there are these two very different markets. The base market is not a good name. That is the welding and cutting market and the medical market, which is a much more local market, many small customers, and these applications, both the welding applications and the medical oxygen applications, are about 100 years old. And we look upon them as something from Grandpa's time, and I'm sure you do that too. But there are some advanced technology also in that field, and that I think we have to develop. And that's where we can beat these local distributors, by having that kind of technology. And many distribution outlets and many competitors. In Europe, however, have these distributors been bought up, almost all of them, by the competition or by the big air companies. In Germany, if you want to order gas, whether it's cylinders or liquid or a pipeline contract, there are only about 4 phone numbers to choose from. That's it. While in this country there are still more than 1,000 distributors. And in many markets I've served, like Detroit here, by many distributors. So there is local competition. Now, the potential gas market, and I've taken the United States here, which is the biggest gas market in the world, followed by Europe and Japan. You can see that the base market, the value, and I'm not speaking volume now because it's the reverse, but in value, the base market is about 2/3, and the process market is 1/3. So we can say, okay, we cover the base market very well. However, the base market is not growing, or grows very little. Almost all the growth is in the process market. And that's the future, I think, of the companies, to be in that market. And there are some areas where we are not really today very strong, like helium, hydrogen, electronic gases, and so on. And I think that has to be developed together with nitrogen, as I've said before. So the total market is approximately $5 billion. And it happens that the U.S. gross national product is $5 trillion. So this is 1 promille of the U.S. market. The chemical industry is something like 7 or 8%. So we are only a small slice of the chemical industry. Very specialized industry. And that's also, once again, why it's a little bit difficult to understand it. It's not something you see everywhere. I think we are all specialists in a way, and looked upon as specialists. And it's not very glamorous. We are not selling something that attracts the big public, usually. But it's nice to have a job also in bad times. So then I think we can leave the glamour to somebody else. So that's the way it looks. And when it comes to gas and welding products, they are sold in the United States through either company-owned stores or distributors. You cannot really sell gas cylinders only. That does not give a sales volume that is big enough to have a store and so on. So you have to have something else. In the United States, it's usually only welding equipment that is sold with gas cylinders. In other parts of the world, especially in Europe, it's industrial building suppliers and suppliers of industrial goods. It could be paint, abrasive, steel, etc., that also supply cylinders, but usually supply cylinders on a commission basis. So they have on their backyard some cylinders, and they get commission by the air gas or the gas company. Any questions at this point? Either I have to deduct that it's too easy, you have understood everything, or that you have nothing understood, but I think you have understood everything. Yes?
What percent of our sales, of our corporate worldwide sales, do we spend on research and development? Do you know?
I would say too little, but I cannot give you a good figure. But I mean, I think it's perhaps 1 or 2%. It's not. I think we have to spend much more than that. It's a good question. And
you want to comment on a competitor, your marginal pricing and what happens with some of the plants?
yes.
Liquid carbonic seems to be remarkably able to put capital projects into the marketplace, but yet their pricing structure seems to be the weakest of any of the suppliers. Where does all that capital come? Why are they so strong financially?
Well, they had old plants. They had a market, and they had old plants that they could close, which gave them a load to some of the new plants. So that's one reason. I think that if we look back when they were bought by Chicago Bridge and Iron, they had a very old-fashioned production, low production efficiency, high cost and so on, and rather old plants. So part of this is new efficiency that they have been able to take out. Pat, do you have a better explanation to how they have been able to keep their prices up?
Well, I don't think they've kept their prices up. I think they're working with a high ratio of nitrogen and oxygen, total molecule recovery, very little technology, and low pricing in return on capital. Very low level of investment in terms of equipment and technology. So they have a lower denominator.
Do they finance or do they support the nitrogen business with their big market share of CO2? Or is that more or less kept separate?
Those numbers are almost impossible to find. I'd love to find them. But my hunch is that CO2 subsidizes their air gas business.
Which would allow them to sell cheaper?
My feeling is that liquid carbonic, except perhaps in the food market, that they have a lower degree of application know-how than we have. And they have probably been forced. They had an old market where they could sell at reasonably good prices, but they have probably been forced to sell also at very low prices, perhaps some of these base loads. Maybe in the freezing of food.
Well, they just seem to have a remarkable amount of financial backing behind them for a business that doesn't look to be that good. So I presume that backing is either CBI or the carbon dioxide side or...
It is the carbon dioxide side. not CBI. CBI has had a very difficult period. You know, they were in the construction business. So the cash flow is coming to a very little extent from that part, but it's coming from CO2, where liquid carbonic is a world champion really, and the biggest company in the United States. They are good in CO2, no doubt about that. Well, let's look at something that perhaps looks very complicated. If you look to the left first, gas. We usually say that gas business has a rotation of capital of 1. That means that per year, if you sell for $100 million, let's say, you will have net assets of 100 million also. So that's 1 to 1. Your capital turnover is once per year. Now, the gross margin is high compared to many other businesses. It's presumed to be 40%. And sales and administration overhead 20%. And depreciation, and this is an ongoing business. As you know, we write off our cylinders, I think, in correct me, 16 years or 20 years. Our trucks in 7 years. And our plants in 10 years. So this is a mix. And the depreciation is 5. And then you have an operating income left of 15 and a return on your capital of 15%. And that's exactly what is our target in AGA Gas Inc. How much is it now, Pat? It's 12 or something like that.
It's 11.5, and next year it will be higher.
Good. That's good. Now, equipment, if you look now on the right side here, the same sales, $100 million per year, but a very bad gross margin, it seems, 26 only. This is, of course, because we don't produce welding equipment. We are just a distributor of welding equipment. So many people think this is a bad business, but you can see them, and I've assumed that the selling and admin expenses are the same as in gas. Nobody has ever been able to show me what is what, you know, in a branch and so on. How much time is used for selling gas, how much time is used for selling welding. So I've just assumed that it's the same. And depreciation, that's mainly inventory that you have to scrap and so on. That's rather little, 1%. So you have 5% operating income. Doesn't look great. It's 1/3 of the operating income of gas. But look at the inventory or the capital necessary to run this business. The inventory, you buy that at cost. That's a 74. And if we can turn it 4 times, which we are doing, I think we are turning it 5 times, aren't we? But 4 times anyway, per year, every 3 months, then that will only, we only will have $18.5 in capital employed by that welding inventory. And then we use, we have the customers that I think they have 50 days, but we would like them to have 45 days. And you told me, I think, that you are at 45 days in your division. Good guys. So there are usually, when you count like this, 360 days in a year. So 45 days out of 360, and we are selling for 100 million. That's the worst sold products. So then that's 12.5, but we can deduct the 2 months or 60 days we get from the distributor or suppliers, Lincoln Electric and whatnot. So that's minus 12.3, and we have only then a capital of 19, which is 1/5 of the capital we need for the same amount of sales, or the same value of sales for gases. And then we have a nice little return on our capital of 26. So selling welding equipment is not so bad, but the whole trick is, of course, to control this, the employment of capital. And that's where we usually fail, and that's why we don't like to sell welding, or we don't think that's a good business. It can be a good business. Any questions on this? Now these are the world leaders in gases. And the definition of oligopoly is that the product is uniform. And I've said that before. And also that there are very few players. And the third thing is none of the players is controlling the market. In this case, it's a global oligopoly. We meet the same players in Brazil, in Spain, in the United States, in Canada, etc. So they have spread all around. And you can see the 4 big guys there. The 4 bigs, they have more than 50% of the world market. And it's a tremendous concentration, really. AGA is the most international of these companies. And the reason is, of course, that AGA has a very small home market. So if you want to be big, you have to sell outside your home market. And this is how I developed this garden of gas. And the moot here, that symbolizes the very high entry costs. In this business, if you want to enter it, it costs certainly $100 million or $200 million. I mean, there is not an easier method to do this if you really want to enter as a newcomer. Just think of building a couple of plants, the trucks, the organization to run this and so on. Tremendous. You're not, if you could come over that moot, you would not be well received either. And the elephant signifies a big chemical company, perhaps a $10 billion or $20 billion company. And Exxon has tried to enter, and the Norwegian company, Norsk Hydro, have also tried to enter. And the elephant really, if it enters, could try to eat the green grass in the middle, but will probably try to eat one of the animals already there. And the German giant Höchst has, as a matter of fact, eaten one of the animals, namely Messer-Griesheim, which is today is 65 or 70% owned by Höchst. So that's the probable way for an elephant to come into this garden of gas. There are 4 lions there, and they are, of course, Liquidaire, or L'Air Liquide, the French company, British Oxygen Company, and Union Carbide. That's the lion with a Band-Aid on it. The reason I put the Band-Aid on it is that they have an enormous debt. They have seemingly got a very big part of the total debt they had before Union Carbide had before the split. So this new company that, by the way, is called Praxair, has a very high debt and has something like 10% equity. And the question is if they can make it, if they can continue to invest and so on, and run this business. It's something that remains to be seen. Then, yes?
Would you care to elaborate on that? What alternatives would be available to Praxair as you see it, if in fact their debt load is so great that they can't continue their operations? Is there a probability that their shareholders would insist that they spin off certain parts of the business?
I think what would rather happen is that somebody would buy them who really is in the business. The problem is that, may I come back to this question, because I'll explain the other symbols first, and I'll come back to it. So anyway, to the left there are 5 leopards. And the leopards are strong animals, as you well know, and seem to be relatively satisfied there. They are, of course, AGA Gas, or the AGA group, Messer and Linde, both of them German companies, and Liquid Carbonic and Nippon Sanso. They are the leopards. And they have rather good coverage of the industrial gas business, all the 5 of them, but they have not the complete coverage like the 4 lions from a technological point of view. And they are not building air separation equipment either. They are to some extent in the cryogenic business, building tanks and so on, some of them. But that's a relatively unimportant part of their business. And then you have the foxes. They are almost eaten up. Only in the United States there were 200 foxes, and the foxes are local air gas producers. But a very few of them now that remain in the world. There are a couple of them here in the United States, 3 or 4, and 5 or 6 in Europe, a couple in Latin America, maybe 20 foxes. If you can't count more, it's my fault. And then the rabbits are distributors. And the rabbits, as I said before, have been almost extinguished in Europe by the lions and the leopards. But here in the United States, there are still some distributors or rabbits, and in Latin America also. So that's the way it looks. And in the middle there is a ranger. And the ranger symbolizes the antitrust authorities. And he's looking at the lions especially, but he's a little bit turned to these leopards also. He doesn't quite trust them. But coming back to Bob's question here, it could be that leopard could overpower a lion, especially a lion that cannot defend itself. And I think that and there are several leopards that could possibly do that. The problem with this lion is that 1/3 of the business is in Brazil, and that's a big investment, white martins, for somebody, and a big risk. Last year it was half the net income of the gas business of Union Carbide. This year it's much less because Brazil has a bad recession. But that also shows that it's risky. There has been rumors that AGA is trying to buy Union Carbide. We are not right now anyway. But it's of course something we are looking at, and I'm sure that Messer and the others, Messer would have enormous resources behind them as they have the elephant there to do that if they want to. AGA has $500 million in cash, by the way, but that's not enough. You have to have much more money. But it helps. Yes.
What is the current worth right now, considering the debt of Praxair? Does anybody really know that?
It's difficult to know that because they haven't, as far as I know, issued. They had a balance sheet when they introduced themselves at the New York Stock Exchange, but I think we have to let some more time, perhaps at least a quarter or 2 quarters pass until we can start to assess their capabilities. Everything was mixed into the chemical business, and do you have a good reply, Pat, to that question? How much coverage they have of their debt or their debt service?
I do have that, but the share value now is about, I think, 15. And they have so many outstanding shares, and you would then add the debt on top. Besides that, you would be paying premium, for that market share. So 2 times sales is not realistic.
Mm-hmm. Any other question? So this is just an example, and here I want your participation because I'm going to ask you what the answer is. This is on any given market, a theoretical market, where the volume grows from existing business. It's a market that does not have a recession, let's say. It's 3%. And the volume grows from new applications is 2%. And all of a sudden, AGA decides to be more active in that market. So it doubles the number of application engineers, and the doubles is number of salesmen and so on. So now it's going out to get double as much share of the new business as it had before. So AGA's share of the existing business is 10%, but we are going to have 1 out of every 5 new customers. All our new applications, all new customers, we will have 1/5 of that growth, 20%. And I see many times in medium range plans and budgets and so on, a lot of optimistic figures. By doing this, there will be a very rapid increase of the market share. But the question is, what will AGA's market share be after 5 years? It's 10% now, and it makes this major effort. What will the market share be in 5 years? What? No? How much will it be? 12% is close to the right answer, but there is a right answer.
You said we have 10.
Yes. And we are going to take 20% of all the new business. The delta, we already have 10%, so now when we go out and take, if we only took 10% of the new business, then our market share would be the same, right? But now, the delta increase is 20 minus 10. We take the delta growth there is, we take 10% extra of that growth. So it's 10% out of the volume growth for new applications, which is 2%. That's 0.2%. 0.2% times 5 years is 1%. So the right answer is 11%, which means that it's very slow process to change market shares in our business. It's only if there is a major breakdown of the service of a competitor, for instance. And it has happened a couple of times. It happened in Venezuela, where we managed to take a big part of the market in a couple of years. And it has happened in other places, strikes and so on. Also, bad management for some time can change the relationships dramatically.
Let me ask you a question along those lines. What about AGA's interest in Canada? Wouldn't you say Canada would be an area that,
yes.
Yes. Where existing management could be challenged, where there is bad management up there, at least suspicious management in the eyes of the Canadians?
Those who are still there. Yes. For those who doesn't know it, the antitrust authorities has reacted very strongly in Canada and caught all the big companies, almost at least, for price agreements. And you can say that that's bad management. Yes, it is. However, to go in Canada against the big four, they are all there, and liquid carbonic is there too. Then you are going to have a rough time at the beginning, at least. Have to go in with very low prices. There are 2 independent Canadian companies, but there's very little to buy, as a matter of fact. The border will be lifted. I guess we could ship over the border. I don't think we should forget about Canada, as a matter of fact. If we build a new plant somewhere, let's think of Canada. Now, market share, this is not a mathematical rule, but it's an empirical rule, rather, that if you have 20% or more market share, you are going to be number 1, number 2, or perhaps number 3. Theoretically and mathematically, it could be number 4, but that never happens. You are 1, 2, or 3. You are one of the big guys on a given market. And you can look, when it comes to cylinder business, on a local market like Detroit. When it comes to the process business, it can be Michigan, for instance, or at least southern Michigan. And why is it so important to have a good share of the market? Well, you cannot be priced out. If you only have a couple of percent, the competitors might price you out. But it's very expensive for them to price you out if you have 20% or more of the market. And you will also have a bigger chance to set prices. And I'm speaking now completely legal ways of setting prices and delivery charges, tank rents, or whatever it is. They will stick. If you are one of the big guys, you have a much better impact on the market. Also, there will be less distances to cover to supply the customers. There will be a denser network or more customer density that is bigger. And you don't get so many miles per cylinder or per truckload to cover. So that's also why you should, if possible, have a high market share. And secondly, you always have fixed costs, overhead, management overhead, administrative overhead, etc. And if you have a big market share, your sales value will, in all probability, be higher, and you have a better relationship between your fixed costs and your variable costs, and you can have little profit, perhaps. So that's now some of these, I think, fundamental things that I have recognized within our business. Some of it is perhaps very elementary, but some of it I think can inspire to some extra thinking in this field. And I think that especially selling more nitrogen would be very beneficial. Anybody that has any question at this point? Yes, Jim?
What is your vision of AGA 2000, other than selling more nitrogen?
That's kind of a good question now, but let me, I think it's, we have to go forward. We have to develop into some of these growing areas of our business, which I don't think that we cover very well. And I think we have to be bigger in the United States. We are too cornered here around the Great Lakes. We are trying now to build up a bigger market share. And Pat, I think around the big lakes or in the Midwest, we are at about 10% market share, or even and we have pockets where we are much higher than that. Cleveland, for instance, Toledo, and Detroit also will be a market where we are going to have a high market share. So we have to continue to build up this, but I'm still looking forward to a big acquisition, really. Not necessarily Union Carbide, everybody thinks about that now. It might be other possibilities, and that we go ahead, become a more sophisticated company, perhaps. And I see AGA also having a lot of strengths through the fact that we are international. We don't have this tremendous impact of our home market, for instance, in case of a recession. We have our risk spread all around. So my vision of AGA is positive, but I think there is a lot of effort that has to go into our business to keep up. And I think the U.S. companies is doing very well. You are on the edge here, but we need more central research, and it does not necessarily have to be in Sweden. It could be somewhere else. So that's about as much as I want to say about my vision of AGA. I think it's a good company, a nice company to work in, but it has to be a little bit sharper, more sophisticated. And we are, in this subsidiary, I think, on our good way. Okay. Yes.
Ake, what effect do you think that the NAFTA treaty with Mexico and Canada will have on AGA's market share, both in the United States and in Mexico?
Yeah, first of all, Mexico will have no effect on on AGA Gas Inc. or very little effect. It's too far away from this company. But the Mexican AGA company will have much more competition, and it has already started. Messe Griesheim and Liquid Carbonic are shipping products into Mexico from California already. So our Mexican company will certainly have to improve its performance, and I think also invest both in more efficient production and in technology. If it comes to Canada, I don't think the difference will be so tremendous, because it's a relatively open border today, as I understand it, and I don't think on the U.S. side, at least, that there will be much difference. On the Canadian side, perhaps it will be easier to go into southern Canada, Ontario, and that part from us. Yes.
Region Europe, how about the European community? How's that going to impact us there?
I hope that it will impact us in a favorable way. I think we have to treat the European market as we treat this market, which means that we have to open up these small kingdoms. It's almost like the branch organization we had here in the United States. It's just that these are bigger units, but today our French company is not selling over the border to Germany or vice versa, and I think we have to disregard these borders and really build future plants where they can best serve Europe. And we are moving with our central dispatch, Dan's business here. I think Dan is covering about the area of Western Europe with his central dispatch, and I can't see why it shouldn't be possible to do it in Europe. So there will be a big change. And the one that can do it first will, I think, benefit from it. And AGA has a good chance. We are strong in France and relatively strong in Germany, strong in Holland. And we should be able, if we react quickly, to build up this. There is a danger that BOC will go into Europe, and they have already built a plant in Holland, as you might know. So I think we have to be quick and build some wall there, if possible. It's almost like a war. Canton, for instance, is like a bunker. It would be very expensive for anybody to try to get us out of the Canton market. It's because we have, as I explained before, the low costs and so on. In spite of the nitrogen molecules, we have the lowest cost of product in northeastern Ohio. So nobody can really afford to start to grapple with us. Yes?
Money going in the future. What subsidiaries will get the money?
What was the question?
What subsidiary will get the money in the future? The answer to that is I think that it's a subsidiary that will offer the shareholders the best return. And therefore, it's so important that we reach this return of, as we said before, Pat, 15% or even above. because we compete with the other companies. And I think we have the worst competition in this country. We are the most efficient gas company here of the AGA companies. We have very little overhead compared to the others, but we have a tremendous competition, and it's difficult under such circumstances to have a good return. There are areas of the world where there is very little competition. And it would be nice, Pat, wouldn't it, as subsidiary manager, if you say that you don't make the budget, you just make a price increase. And everybody's happy. But we can't do that, of course. So I think we are on our good way. We are more efficient. We have been able to sell. You said yesterday somebody's selling at 80% of schedule, which means already that we are over the 30 cents that I showed you here a moment ago. Yes, Joanne?
Do you have any idea of what the return on net assets is for our competitors?
What was the question?
The question is what the return on net assets is for our competitors. I think it is around 15%. I don't know. We are doing it sometimes, I know, at the corporate level in Sweden, but we don't get all of this, and maybe we have to start to do this ourselves here. Any other questions? What's the program? Shall you take over and
I will
explain that?
Well, first of all, could we all give our... Okay, the agenda calls for a